Just my luck. I woke up coughing so hard it felt like my ribs were breaking. My chest burned with every breath, and my head throbbed like I had taken a crowbar to the skull. It might be better to set up shop near the fireplace. Another cough racked my body, loud and echoing. Then I heard some banging. My stomach sank. I forced myself up, grabbed my axe, and went to check it out. Maybe they heard me coughing, or maybe it was just blind luck. Either way, they were close enough to be a problem. The house was quiet again, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. The windows were so vulnerable, and this place wouldn't hold if more of them came. I needed to board them up, but that meant going back into the cold. My body begged me to stay indoors, but I grabbed my axe anyway and forced myself out. By the time I dragged the logs inside, my fingers were so numb I could barely feel them. I sawed the logs into planks and hammered them over the windows, sealing the house one board at a time. The work was slow and grueling, but I didn't stop until every window on the first floor was secure. Once the house was locked down, I grabbed my axe again, and I returned to the bitter cold, chopping the remaining trees into logs for the fireplace. By the time I had finished, I could barely stand. I dragged myself upstairs, moved a bed from one of the rooms down to the living room, and set up near the fireplace. Staying close to the heat seemed like my best chance to get out of the sickness. As the fire crackled and I buried myself under every blanket I could find, I forced myself to eat. The food was bland and cold, but it would have to do. Then I pulled out one of the books I had scavenged and tried to read. But my mind wouldn't stay on the words, it kept circling back to the same thoughts. The wooden boards wouldn't hold forever, not against a determined horde. The cold was only getting worse, and food and fuel wouldn't last. And then there was the cure. If I was serious about it, I need power, proper equipment, and a plan. The generator I found was a start, but it wouldn't be enough on its own. Morning came slowly, the pale light barely filtering through the boarded up windows. I got up feeling better than the day before. My fever had broken, and the coughing had mostly subsided. I had one goal today: organization. It hit me last night how much of a mess the house had become. Bags of loot were scattered upstairs, piled high with no rhyme or reason. If this was going to be my home, I needed to treat it like one. The first thing I had noticed was how prepared that survivor, the one whose gear I took, had been. There was enough canned food to last for weeks, maybe longer if I rationed properly. Weapons too, more than I realized. Guns, ammo, even seeds. I found another bag packed with medical supplies, antibiotics, painkillers, bandages, and even some surgical tools. It was almost too good to be true. As I laid it all out, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of person this survivor had been. Paranoid? A prepper? Maybe just someone who had the foresight I didn't. Then there were the crafting supplies. Nails, duct tape, wires, tools, even a small propane torch. Enough to build or repair just about anything. Seeing it all laid out gave me a strange sense of hope. Maybe I really could make something out of this place. I froze, my hand instinctively reaching for my trusty axe. Who was that? A woman? Her name was Tracy. She said she had been wandering for some days after getting separated from her group. She had found me by the smoke from the chimney. I didn't know what to think. Was she telling the truth? Was it some kind of setup? My gut told me to kick her out, but I couldn't ignore the desperation in her voice, or the fact that she looked half frozen. Against my better judgment, I offered her a room upstairs. Her relief was immediately followed by her professing her thanks. Tracy told me about her group. There were survivors looking to leave Louisville. She had gotten separated during the last blizzard and had been wandering ever since. The mention of other survivors made my stomach tighten. A group of strangers showing up here wasn't something I was ready for. The thought made my head spin. I had been thinking about creating a safe haven, but this was all happening too fast. If they had showed up here, would I have enough to share? Would they even listen to me? Or would they take what they wanted and leave me with nothing? If I wanted to keep this house secure, I couldn't wait for trouble to find me. I needed to be proactive. More defenses, more supplies, and maybe even a plan of what to do if her group came looking for her. I had woke up feeling drained, even though I had gotten some sleep. The fire had kept the chill at bay through the night, but it couldn't do anything for the weight in my chest. Yesterday's thoughts hung over me like the blizzard's clouds outside. If I wanted to keep this place secure, if I wanted to build something that mattered, I needed more supplies. And that in this apocalypse, anything that could go wrong would go wrong. I decided to stop fighting the uncertainty. Instead of trying to plan every detail, I would adapt, go with the flow. And that's where I saw him. He said his name was Edward and that he was passing through. When I asked where, he replied nowhere specifically. And I lowered my weapon and asked if he wanted to join me. To my surprise, he agreed without hesitation. On the way, I asked about his situation. He told me everything, how he lost his loved ones in the outbreak, how depression kept him rooted in the place for months, and how he finally managed to pull himself together enough to start traveling. The afternoon was spent trying to delegate tasks, but it didn't go as smoothly as I hoped. I had asked Edward to help clear the corpses from the perimeter, but he brought them inside by mistake. Meanwhile, Tracy flat out refused to cut down trees for firewood, muttering something about being too dangerous. Frustrated but determined, I took matters in my own hands. If I wanted them to follow, I needed to lead by example. I dragged the corpses outside, chopped enough firewood to last a few days. By the time I was done, the sun was dipping low and my muscles ached. I showed Edward to one of the empty rooms upstairs. Told him if anything gets cramped, we can always spread to the houses next door. As the day wound down, a strange feeling nagged at me. I pulled to check the houses next door. I grabbed my axe and made my way over. Inside, I found another survivor. He said his name was Alan, standing by a makeshift barricade near the front door. He didn't seem too surprised to see me, like he had been expecting someone to show up eventually. Alan had claimed the house for himself, but admitted it needed a lot of work to be livable. Tracy, Edward, Alan, how many more people would show up? How many more people could I take before everything collapsed?